Hey, what's up, guys? It's Chris, Prodigy Maker Show, episode 22. We are live Thursday night. I'm here with my co-host, Sammy. Sammy, say hello, buddy. There he is, that's Sammy, my Academy dog. We're here for another show, our 22nd episode. I'm very excited to be here tonight, although it's been a very long week. And I had a good night on the courts. I just finished up with a few great lessons tonight, actually. So I'm pretty enthusiastic, feeling pretty good, enthusiastic that I had a great day on the courts. You know, sometimes you have a lesson where you have a breakthrough, or you're able to you take a risk and you connect with a kid. And I had that experience tonight, so I'm feeling very rewarded by that. And I'm happy to welcome everyone to the show. We're going to be talking about Spanish tennis tonight, and also I'd like to talk about what makes a great coach and some of the pitfalls and some of the common mistakes that I see parents make when they're choosing a junior coach. So we'll be talking about that later. And as always, I'll be taking your questions. If you have any questions about junior development, if you have any questions about high performance tennis, if you have any questions about technique, these are some of my favorite topics. Also, of course, Spanish tennis, which is one of my favorite subjects as well. So let's get into the program. I see some friends are signing on, and some old friends of the show, and old personal friends, and also we'll probably get some new members in the community tonight. I'm trying to build this audience up. So we do this show every week, typically now on Thursday nights. And then also, if you can't catch the show on Thursday nights, you can catch the replay on our YouTube channel, which is just Chris Lewit. You can search Chris Lewit on YouTube and it'll come right up. So we have all of our shows, the videos of the shows there. And then we have, the show is also rebroadcast as a podcast on all your favorite podcasting platforms. So thank you for tuning in any way that you like, and thank you for contributing to the show. I appreciate it if you can share the show with others. That's a big one, so we can grow our audience. So if you don't mind, there's a way to share a Facebook Live feed in your settings. If you go to there's an option to share live. You can share the feed with your friends, or later on, if you have if you enjoyed the show, you can also share it after the fact, of course. So thank you for sharing any way you can, and thank you for telling your friends about the show. So tonight, I wanted to talk about Spanish tennis and some of the things that make Spanish tennis great. Had a little online debate about whether the Spanish method is just a marketing gimmick, and I don't think it is a marketing gimmick. I think there is something to the Spanish method. Obviously, I've written a lot about it. I wrote The Secrets of Spanish Tennis, which is, I think, the number one book on the subject. I don't know anyone else who's written a book on Spain the way that I did. Hey, Vanessa, how are you? Old friend from Vegas, tuning in. Thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions on junior development, feel free to post them, and I will answer. And in the meantime, I'm going to rap a little bit about Spanish tennis. So for me, the biggest thing that I can tell you guys about Spain and Spanish tennis is that the method there, when you go there, or when I first went there, you see something very unique. And one of the things that is super unique is the ratio and the excessively long drilling. So the drilling system there, and I'm going to call it a system for lack of a better word. Some people want to debate, the word system or method or philosophy or whatever you want to call it. The system there is, the drill system is unique. I've never seen anything like it, and it's long. So what happened was, in the 70s, there was this coach, William Pato Alvarez, and he was from Colombia, and he somehow ended up in the Barcelona area, and he started taking players under his wing. I believe he first worked in the federation, the Spanish Federation, and he started taking players under his wing and coaching them privately. And he developed this very unique drill system. But I don't want to get too much into the weeds of the drill system unless you guys want to ask me questions about it. But what Pato did was he linked a number of exercises together into long series. So his exercises would go, 20 balls at a minimum, and they could go into the hundreds of balls in a row. And that is, for me, the most singular aspect of Spanish tennis, and what makes the Spanish method is the long suffering drills, the drills that make you suffer, the drills that build endurance, and they don't stop. So typically in other countries where I visited, the drills will stop at 8 or 10 or 12 shots because the coaches believe that makes a better quality. And in Spain, especially in the Pato Alvarez system, we can talk more about the systems, the different methods there, the different lineages there, because there's the Bruguera lineage, and then there's the Nadal lineage, and each method and approach, whatever word you want to use, is a little different, but they have these similarities, and that's kind of what I wanted to write in my book. I wanted to explain and distill the similarities that I saw across the country. And so I would definitely refer you to my book, The Secrets of Spanish Tennis, if you're interested in learning more about the commonalities. And I will sort of summarize those here. But if you want to get into more depth, you could always check out the book, of course. And getting back to Pato, so Pato developed this series of drills, which were relatively unique. And then he linked them together, and he kept going with them. Like, he wouldn't stop, because the guy, and I studied with Pato, he's a bit of a sadist. He really wants to make his players suffer. And so the way that he figured out how to do it is to make the drills just keep going. Like a normal person, I want to say, who's not crazy. I guess every genius, every great person maybe has a little crazy in them, right? So he just decided to keep going in the drills until the player basically collapsed. So he would just keep going and keep going and keep going, and the player kind of look at him and he'd be like, "What? We're just going to keep working here." And that was his genius, his hard work, and his willingness to just continue, to sigue, like they say in Spain, sigue, 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 continue, continue, continue. That's a very common philosophy, and that's part of the method that you see in Spain, but you see it all around the country, not just in the Sanchez Casal, Pato Alvarez lineage or model of training. But that is where it originated back in the 70s. Pato came to Spain and he started doing something different. He started bringing these baskets of balls and he started pushing players in long sets with dozens and dozens of repetitions, sometimes hundreds of repetitions. And that, I believe, is one of the genius aspects of Spanish tennis. And so when people say, okay, what is Spanish tennis? I think you have to go back to those seminal years. There's a giant inflection point that happened when William Pato Alvarez decided to set up his home base in Spain, and specifically in Barcelona, in the Barcelona area. So I think you have to understand some of the history, and you have to know a little bit about Pato Alvarez, William Pato Alvarez, and his work, and his drill system, and his philosophy, his approach. So, hey guys, it's great to see you checking in. I see some old friends waving. Thank you so much. And I also see some fans of the book. Thank you. Larry R. Klein says, great book. Thank you, Larry. Appreciate it. Appreciate the shout outs, guys. And my buddy Gordon Paul, who's an excellent coach, has come to a lot of trainings with me. Gordon, I've been working on some new trainings coming up. I'm going to post those for everyone soon at my new coach trainings at my club. Anyway, it's good to see you guys. So, 1970s, this guy Pato Alvarez, he comes in. I mean, it may have been even later 60s. I don't know. I don't have the exact date, but he was there in the 70s, working for the Federation, more or less. And then he went out on his own privately. So, around that time, there's a guy in Barcelona, and his name is Luis Bruguera. Luis Bruguera was a pretty good player, probably like a college level player who didn't make it as a pro. I guess he wasn't good enough. Like a lot of people, he was a good club player and a good college level player. And Luis got into coaching. And so I think Luis is a little bit younger than Pato. So I think Luis is in his mid to late 60s if I had to guess, and Pato is probably nearing mid 70s. I could find out the exact dates, guys. I'm sorry, but I think there's a slight generational gap, a little bit of a gap there. But basically, they're contemporaries in the sense that they were both coaching at a similar moment in time in Spain, and specifically very close to each other in Barcelona. So, Luis Bruguera starts coaching also in the Barcelona area, and he starts developing his son, Sergi Bruguera. And this is also dovetailing with Pato in the scope of time. So this is maybe, late 70s. Luis is starting to coach, if I get my timeline right, and then early 80s. Sergi, I think, is my age, so no, Sergi's a little older than me. So Sergi was coming up in the 80s, and I think he won the Spanish Nationals as a junior in the late 80s. Could have been 88 or 86. I'm sorry, guys, I haven't. I did all this research for my book maybe 5 or 6 years ago, so it's not fresh in my mind, but I could dig it up if I had to. But basically the timeline is, so Luis is coming in a little bit after Pato, and Luis is a big student of the game, and he has a brilliant mind as well. And what he does is he also decides to create a drilling system that goes on and on and on. And so you have these two giants in Spain, these two giant heavyweights. I would definitely call them genius coaches who transformed the teaching system in Spain. They transformed the game in Spain and the way people trained, the way coaches operated, and they created a common philosophy, and they also sometimes shared drills, not literally shared, but whether by purposely copying each other or mimicking each other or just coincidentally, some of their drills overlapped. So the Bruguera system and the Alvarez system in some ways overlap some drills, and in some ways the drills are a little bit different. But one of the commonalities in their drilling system was this idea of suffering through many, many endless repetitions. And for me, that's what I see as the heart and soul of the Spanish method. The willingness to keep going by the coach and the player, the willingness to suffer. And the suffering comes through attrition, it comes by attrition, and it comes through this long series of drills, mainly drills from the basket. But there are other drills that you can also do live. The coach can become a wall, which is another aspect of the Spanish method that is very common all across the country, that you don't see in other, I've never seen in other places, in the sense that the coach becomes a wall and the player has to keep going forever against the wall with endless repetition until the player collapses or the player survives. And for me, that is what the heart of the Spanish method is. And I don't think everyone really understands that who's out there, because they've never been to Spain and never studied with those guys. They don't really know the details of the philosophy and approach of those legends. Because what happened is, as William Pato Alvarez started to have success, starting in the 70s and into the 80s and 90s, and Luis Bruguera started to have success in the 80s, and when his son Sergi won the French Open, it was a really big deal in Spain. It was a huge moment in Spain, because there had been a long drought they didn't have any Grand Slam winner on the men's side for over, I believe it was over 17 years. So Sergi came along and was a Spanish junior champion, and then Sergi won Roland Garros in 1993. And this was an incredible moment for Spain, and most of the coaches and tennis families in Spain wanted to know what Luis was doing with his son to make him so good. Obviously, that's how it works in every country with every prodigy and every legendary player. Everyone in that country wants to know what they did to get really good at tennis and how they succeeded. So that's what happened in Spain. But at the same time, you had a contemporary of Luis, a little bit older, started a little before Luis, William Pato Alvarez, in the same city, by the way, which is remarkable in and of itself, so the same city. And Pato was also developing a lot of really good players. Now, he didn't have any singles Grand Slam winners. He had players like Emilio Sanchez and Sergio Casal, who went on to found the Sanchez-Casal Academy. But they did win the doubles Grand Slam. They won several Grand Slams in doubles. And they were the number one doubles team in the world. So they were competitors. They were contemporaries and competitors. And they were both top dogs in Spain in that era, going back into the 80s and the early 90s. They were big. They were, like I said, the grandfathers of Spanish tennis. They were the gurus in Spain, the most successful coaches of the time. And you could maybe argue that Luis had more success because he broke the drought of the singles Grand Slam winner for the men. But it's the bottom line is they were both revered, and everyone wanted to know what they were doing. And so you got to get back to that source, that you have to understand that origin to understand what is the Spanish method. Because the Spanish method is not just a catchphrase used for marketing. It goes back to the philosophy of those guys, those two guys, and their drill system, and their approach to the game. So another thing that makes up a big, important part of the Spanish method is a focus on fitness and a focus on being in incredible shape, physical shape, and to have this incredible endurance and ability to run and to stay healthy through injury prevention. So that was another obsession that Pato and Luis had. So you have this unique approach to the game in terms of drilling, and you have this obsession with fitness and getting in incredible condition. And so there, for me, you have another key to what is the Spanish method, those two things. And of course, there's more. As I mentioned in my book, I talked about 6 aspects of the Spanish way. I call them secrets, but they're not really secrets anymore, I guess. And I can list them now for those who haven't read the book. Basically, what you see around the country is a focus on movement, a focus on a big acceleration building, especially with the forehand, so weapon building, a focus on consistency, a focus on defense, a focus on physical conditioning, which is what I just mentioned, and a focus on suffering. So those were the 6 planks, the 6 posts or chapters in my book. That I during my travels and studies in Spain, I felt comfortable stating were the ethos, the core of the Spanish method, or the Spanish approach, or the Spanish way, or the Spanish whatever you guys want to call it, okay? The Spanish system. People get all wrapped up in the words, the semantics of it, but whatever you want to call it, right? So, but when you get down to the brass tacks, it's that willingness to go forever in the drill. That is for me such an important element. And it gets back to suffering. It gets back to, how do you make your players suffer? Are there other ways to make a player suffer? Sure. You can yell at the players and make a short drill really intense. It's a different kind of suffering. It's more of an anaerobic type of suffering. In Spain, what Pato and Luis decided was the best way to make a player suffer is aerobically. And it's also, by the way, the safest way to make a player suffer, which a lot of people discount, or they don't realize that when you do a long, slow, rhythmic set of drills and you get the repetitions very high, it's very safe. It's not, I don't want to say it is very demanding, but it's demanding of the body in a way that typically has a low incidence of injury, versus short bursting type drills that are very low repetition but very explosive. An analogy might be working out in the gym, doing a 1 to 5 repetition set of bench press, very close to your maximum, so very high intensity, versus doing a bench press of 15 or 20 or 30 reps, which is not as intense, but will definitely fatigue you in a different way. It'll also fatigue your mind more because it requires more attention, and it's going to be you're going to be working for a longer period of time. So it builds sort of a patience and a discipline in the mind as well. So that's sort of the metaphor that I would use. And Luis, I spent a lot of time studying with Luis Bruguera. So Luis he's told me many times that he studied with Harry Hopman, the legendary Australian coach, who I think in many ways was a predecessor to the Spanish reign, a predecessor to the Spanish greats in terms of coaching and in terms of philosophy and system, because Hopman was known for being very tough and emphasizing physical superiority, physical fitness. And Luis was a big fan of Hopman's and went to study with him. He told me the story. I think he went to study with him in Florida, in the U.S. And he said he tried to learn as much as he could from Hopman. And when he came back to Spain, he decided to do some similar exercises, but to make the drills go on and on and on and on. That was his solution to making the system of Hopman better in Luis Bruguera's mind. That's how he saw it. That's how he stood on the shoulders of giants, as they say. So that's what Luis Bruguera believed, and Pato Alvarez was doing the same, just a stone's throw away, in the same city, the same era. And so this created a wave of revolution, like a revolutionary wave across the tennis world in Spain, a tidal wave. And all of the other coaches in Spain, I don't want to say all, but most, revered these guys and wanted to learn from these guys, or at the minimum, wanted to find out what they were doing so they could compete better with them, because they were on top in Spain. And Spain is not that big a country, and the system of Pato and Luis, in one form or another, basically became the de facto training method in Spain. Now, were there other great coaches in Spain? Yeah, in other parts of Spain. For example, there was this guy, you may have heard of him, Tony Nadal, bringing up his nephew in Mallorca, which is not far from Barcelona, by the way. And Tony has a slightly different approach, but to me seems heavily influenced by Luis Bruguera's philosophy, and probably also by Pato's. How could he not have been? Because those guys were the men of the time. They were the dudes. They were killing it. You get what I'm trying to say. So, that's what Spanish tennis is. That's what the Spanish method is. That's the heart of it. You have to understand the history and get a little bit granular in the detail to understand what they do that's special. And people are just ignorant. People just say, oh, that's just marketing shtick. Oh, that's just commercialism, blah, 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 catchphrases and sales pitches. And there is some of that now, but there truly is a Spanish method that's different than anywhere else in the world. A Spanish philosophy that is unique. A Spanish drill system that is unique. And now it's changing a little, because there are new generations of coaches who are evolving the method. But that's historically accurate. It's historically accurate. What I just described and summarized is, to the best of my ability, historically accurate. And I think it's very accurate to say that there is a Spanish style, a Spanish approach, and that's sort of at the heart of it. You have the long drilling, you have the focus on fitness, you have a focus on making a player suffer through long drilling, and then the other aspects that I mentioned that are part of my book. So, to me, it's very clear, and I hope that helps clear it up for you guys. And if you have any questions about Spanish tennis or the Spanish method, please let me know. The only caveat or warning I would tell you all in the audience is that it's not accurate to say that one great coach in Spain is the Spanish method. Because in my mind, the Spanish style or approach or system is an amalgamation of the legends, especially Pato Alvarez and Luis Bruguera. So there's been a mixing, and I look at the common underpinnings of those great coaches and their philosophies. I don't think it's accurate for just one lineage to claim that they are Spanish tennis, and there are some lineages that are now doing that, and I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to get too much into the details or name names, but there is some crass commercialism going on now, and there are certain lineages that want to stake a claim as the rightful owners of Spanish tennis, and that's not really what I'm all about. I don't try to be partisan like that. I try to be impartial, and I try to share with my audience and my readership and my viewers as clear a picture as I can make of it in an unbiased way. So we could get even more into the history and talk about Tony Nadal and Tony's method and Tony's philosophy, and that is interesting as well. And then there are some other greats. You know, there are greats in other parts of the country, down in Valencia and Alicante. So my focus is on what happened in Barcelona in 1970s, 1980s with Luis Bruguera and William Pato Alvarez. That's always been my focus, and that's the crux of my book, The Secrets of Spanish Tennis. That was the history that I laid out, and that was the argument that I made at the time, and I still believe that argument very strongly. So Jim Kane says, yes, amigo, read your insightful book, saw Pato work a player in person. Emilio seemed proud of the fact Pato made him suffer when I spoke to him at the PTR conference. Wonder if the sign of the times now would be conducive to pushing continuous suffering players like Pato Bruguera. No, Vince Lombardi style, no doubt some critics would show up on the scene claiming abuse, etc. Yeah, these coaches push very hard, but I think it's not abusive, this type of drilling. If you see it, yeah, I guess, you know, there's it could be called abusive, I suppose, if the wrong if people got the wrong impression by watching, but it's tough work. Suffering is not pretty. When you see a coach making a player suffer on the court, it's not going to be pretty. And sometimes that's what you need to extract the greatness. It's interesting for me that in my work, I found that some players, they don't really respond well to that endless drilling. And some players just love it. They really, really dig into it, and they enjoy the suffering. And they feel a challenge, and they feel rewarded. They feel it makes them stronger and better. And I have some players who are they're my live ball players. They're players who they don't get as much out of that style of drilling. And so I try to actually customize my training based on the individual in front of me, and I try to adjust the type of drills that I use based on the learning style and personality of my students. Now that's something that Pato Alvarez and Luis Bruguera certainly don't do. And I've taken many teams to the Bruguera Academy, players from the US, my players, who I've known very well. And it's been interesting to see how some of the personalities on my team really love the Bruguera style of endless drilling, and some of them not so much. And I would submit to you guys that the mind, the type of mind, the type of brain, the brain type of a player who likes to do the Spanish style of drilling, the endless reps, it's the type of person who needs the repetition. The repetition builds them confidence, and they don't mind the drudgery, the dreary aspect of it, because the repetition can be boring for many kids, and it can lack creativity. So my creative players, the ones who love to play and are always thinking about tactical options and they like to compete, they sometimes don't really appreciate that old school Pato Alvarez style or even the Bruguera style. You know, they're not the type of kids that like to go to have me volley as the wall, and they want to see how many they can get on the wall. I have some students that they don't really care. They're like, oh, the wall, I don't want to do that. And you have a choice as a coach. You can say, okay, you need to do that because that is what's going to make you strong. Or you can maybe find another way to push them that might be more conducive to their learning style. So that's what I found in my own work. As I've experimented with the Spanish style, I've noticed that there are some personalities that really gravitate towards that style, and they love it. It's so good for them to keep going, to keep going, to keep going for them, to push them past limits that they set for themselves, and to break through barriers for them in terms of how many balls that they're able to hit. It makes them so strong, and they feel better at the end. Versus some kids who, when you go a long time, they just feel it's a bit of a waste for them. It's enough to maybe do 10 or 15 or 20. And for them, it can be a little more quality over quantity. So I really think that in some ways, and I've also talked about this with some coaches in Spain, and some even I would love to have this discussion with Luis himself, who I'm still close with. But I really think they could be more player-centered in the way they do their drills. You know, not every kid maybe has to do 800 balls in a row on the wall, or not every player needs to do such and such amount of baskets on a daily basis in the Pato Alvarez system. You know, maybe some players can do a little more live ball, maybe more games approach, you know, more gameplay and tactical that way, rather than just rote drilling. And Pato Alvarez was very rote drilling focused in terms of patterns. You know, one of the differences between the Bruguera system and the Alvarez system is the Alvarez system has mostly fixed patterns that the players have to follow. So you play this one cross, you play this one down the line, and so on and so forth. Everything is fixed, and you just do them over and over again. It reminds me a lot of religion and church. You know, there are some churches that have a very fixed liturgy, and you go, and it's the same type of worship every week. And like, for example, I'm Episcopalian, and oftentimes in the Episcopal Church, it's the same routine every week. And I've been to many other churches where sometimes they mix it up and the worship service changes and has a little bit of different flow to it. And some people love a church like that, and some people don't. They find it sort of repetitive and boring. And for me, that is the Spanish system, especially the system of Pato Alvarez. It's very repetitive, and some people find a great comfort in that. I know many Episcopalians and Catholics too, who find a great comfort in the repetitive nature of the worship and liturgy. And I know many people who are turned off by that. They don't like that type of church. And to each his own. So, you know, go where you feel more comfortable. But I think it gets back to brain type and personality. So what I try to do in my work, in my practice as a coach, is to try to read my player and offer them a drill system and a philosophical approach that fits their personality best and their learning style. I need to make them tough, but maybe I don't need to make them tough with 200 balls in a row in a fixed pattern. Maybe I can find another way to make them tough. Maybe if they're very creative and they love to play games and compete, I can do more games-based. I can do more competitive point situations with them, and I can find a way to make them suffer in another aspect of their training. Maybe with the off-court trainer, or maybe if I can have them play someone who's very solid, like I still play at a very high level. I can make a kid suffer just by hitting with them, and it's a little more fun for them to do it that way. You know, if I can grind a kid down, I just did that tonight. You know, I took several players in our group, and I just basically rallied with them, working on accuracy and control, but I never missed. So it's kind of like what Pato Alvarez was doing, but not with a basket, and it pushed the players in a way that was maybe more interesting than just straight drilling from a basket, because it was live ball. And also what I could do is I could maybe sometimes throw in a point play, because I'm rallying with them. I could maybe throw in I could say, let's play, point, let's play. And that could be a little more fun way or interesting way for that player to suffer with me. So just things like that. That's what I've been working on in my own coaching world here in New York and in Vermont at our camp. So I don't know if that interests you guys, but it's definitely something that I've wanted to discuss, and I'm glad we finally got it on video, and we can, I can share this with folks, and we can get some good debate going about it. But let me start to move on to the second topic of the night, which is how to find the right coach for your kid. This is speaking a lot to parents, but I think others will also find it interesting, and maybe some common mistakes that parents make when choosing a coach. And I'm seeing this a lot. So let me just go through a few, and then been a heck of a long day. I think I'll join Sammy for a nap. Sammy is just fast asleep right now. So let's talk first about mistakes that parents make. And some of the mistakes, I'll give you the first biggest mistake that I see parents. Parents assume that when someone played at a high level, that they're going to be a great coach. And this is the most absurd myth or fallacy possibly in junior tennis, because there's some truth to the fact that someone who played really well probably has more knowledge than someone who didn't play well. And I'll explain what I mean by that. But at the same time, there are many examples of great coaches who never played or played very poorly. And there's something to be said about someone who didn't play at a high level, who's still really hungry to develop top players. And sometimes that hunger is not there in someone who made it as a pro, or whatever level we're talking about here. Let me explain a little more. So why does someone who played at the pro level have more knowledge generally than a coach who didn't? Because they usually have access to the best coaches in their respective country, in their federation. They get the most attention from the greatest minds in the sport. So the more talented the kid is, usually they get access and they spend a lot of time with the best minds, the best tennis minds in their respective country. So that automatically is an incredible resource for those kids as they're growing up. And that means that after a professional career, or if they don't make it on the tour for whatever reason, they have this wellspring of knowledge that is very valuable and unique, because the less talented kids usually don't have access to the greatest coaching minds when they're young. So I hope that makes sense. So in that respect, the best players have this incredible, valuable knowledge, or they can. If they listened, and if they are able to take that, what they learned as a kid, and apply it to and help others with it, sometimes you have really good athletes, really talented athletes who they don't actually know how they do it. Maybe they had access to all the greatest tennis minds in their country, but they didn't really listen that much, and they didn't need to listen that much because they were just kind of naturals. And so it would be a big mistake as a parent to hire someone like that to coach your kid who maybe isn't a natural. because that kid probably needs someone who understands how to learn the game when they're not super gifted and they can't just pick things up with the snap of their fingers. So that's important to know as a parent, Well, does my coach have a lot of experience competing? Now, in that respect, again, a professional player or former professional player, high-level player, is going to have more experience competing at a high level against many different high-level competitors than someone who only played, let's say, high school tennis, or someone who never competed at all. But that doesn't, again, necessarily mean that they're able to transmit that knowledge to their young charges, their students. But those are definitely the pros of working with someone who's a great former player. But it's ridiculous, it's absurd for a parent to just hire someone because they played really well. Because you got to do a little more digging. You got to find out, can that person teach? Can they transmit their knowledge? Can they inspire a young kid? Do they have any experience with young kids? And we'll talk about that also, because that's probably the second biggest mistake is hiring a coach who doesn't have experience with your niche player, your niche of player. Anyway, so many times players who made it at a very high level, they're not hungry to develop juniors again. They sort of did it. They made it to the big show, and they lose their motivation. So that is something to guard against as a parent. Watch out for the former top 100 player or top 150 player or number one junior in the world or whatever, who's just sort of milking it. There's a lot of examples of guys like that who they were great, but they're not that hungry. They want a cushy job maybe. That's why you got to watch out for the country club coaches. Those are guys who went into a career field that is not that demanding, and they want to be in a cushy place where things are a little easier. And so that's why I'm always suspicious of guys who are working in a country club. I'm suspicious of their hunger. Not always the case, but a lot of times those coaches have lost their hunger and their passion. And especially if they already made it as players, they may not have the passion to go through the whole series again, the whole timeline with a young kid, And to be honest, I don't hire coaches who work in country clubs. If I see on a resume that a guy worked for a while in a country club, it's a huge red flag for me as a club owner and as an academy owner. I would never hire a guy who was comfortable in a country club unless they had a really good reason why they were trying to get out. Like maybe they tried it and they want to leave, So anyway, that's off topic. But as a parent, please watch out for coaches who are in country clubs. And yeah, look for a coach who has a high-level playing experience. That's fantastic. But make sure they can transmit that knowledge and that they're still hungry. They have a passion. And also they have a passion for learning and education, because in my experience, some of the guys who are really good, they were really good players or are really good players, a lot of times they think they know everything. So you get guys with ATP points or higher, guys who have big-time world rankings. A lot of them have huge egos, and they just think they know everything. They don't want to read any biomechanics research. They don't want to read about anything, really. Sports psychology, latest fitness methods. They think they got it all, especially if they were on the ATP tour or WTA tour. They basically think they figured everything out, and they know more than everyone. And they do know a lot. They do know a lot from those experiences. And they get to work with amazing people on the ATP Tour. Some of the greatest minds in tennis. are on the ATP and WTA professional tours. So they have an incredible access to that knowledge, but sometimes there's like a hubris associated with these people, and hubris leads to nemesis. They don't want to keep improving. They don't want to keep studying. They don't feel they need to learn more, and so those coaches will be limited. Parents need to watch out for that. Especially coaches who are getting older. Maybe they played on the tour many years ago, decades ago, and if they haven't done any continuing ed, or they haven't been keeping up on their knowledge of the tour. I mean, some guys played pro decades ago, and they haven't been on the pro tour for years, and they're really a little bit out of touch with what's going on with the modern game. You have to watch out for that too. Retired pros who haven't been around the high level of the game in a long time, for example. Okay. On the flip side, so let me put in a word for my brothers and sisters who didn't play very well. Now, as a parent, I would be very wary to hire a coach who didn't play and didn't know how to play, because I think I would say most of the time, they're just not going to have the knowledge or background to develop a top junior. Now, there are some exceptions to that. My focus is on high performance. Everything that I'm saying here is for high performance. If you're listening to this show, you want to know how to find a good coach for your junior, because I'm assuming you want to develop that player into a top college player or a professional player. You're looking for someone who can do high performance. That's my angle. That's my niche. So if you're just looking for a coach for your kids to have fun at the local club, or introduce them to the game, that's not really what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about someone who can wire and inspire your kid for greatness. So I'm going to stand up for the little guys now and girls, ladies and gents who never really played. So one thing that these types of coaches bring to the table is they're super hungry. They know they didn't make it. They were never maybe great athletes. They never held up a lot of trophies, and so they have to earn it. They're usually more humble, and they have a great passion and hunger to develop a top player because they never did it, right? So there are a lot of coaches out there who didn't play, but they're so hungry and so passionate that they make up for it with their intensity, with their ability to motivate and communicate. They may be natural teachers. And then through a relentless pursuit of education. And that is, I think, for parents, something you got to look for in a coach, someone who's relentlessly educating themselves. So you might want to know if they're familiar with the latest research in biomechanics or sports psychology or physical training. You would want to know if they are keeping up with their certifications. Are they doing CEUs? Some coaches haven't done a CEU. They don't know what a CEU is. They can't even say it, like me. So you're looking for coaches who keep up on their education and who have an insatiable desire to learn and to keep learning and to get better. So that's one thing I would tell you as a parent, as something that I look for in the coaches. And I have 3 going on. I'm going to have 4 kids real soon, and this is something that I look for in a coach in any sport. The best possible combination is a coach who played high level as possible, and who has the insatiable hunger, still has the passion to develop a player, and the insatiable desire to keep learning and getting better. As a parent, you should be looking for that type of coach. So they combine both the knowledge and the experience, having worked with great, brilliant minds in the game, and also the practical side of things where they're keeping up on their studies and their sports science, and also are they inspirational, are they great communicators, and can they really teach? Sometimes you get these coaches who are really knowledgeable, they have a tremendous resume, and they're just a dud on the court. Like you get them out on the court and they don't have a great charisma, and they're not able to lead little kids to the championship. So the greatest junior coaches that I've spent time with, they have that Pied Piper quality. They can lead these children. They can motivate and inspire a child. And that comes from communication primarily, and the ability to inspire. It's part of its charisma. It's dynamism. It's the magnetic quality, the X factor that makes a coach great. I don't know if you can teach that. You either have it or you don't. So look for that X factor in a coach as well, because that can make up for a lot. But if you can get the X factor, former high-level player, so they have some really good experience, and an insatiable curiosity and appetite for continuing education, you got a really strong package there for your junior player. I would definitely advise you guys to look for those three big qualities. As I'm wrapping here, I'm thinking about what I would look for in a coach for my children, and I guess that would be those would be the first three. And there's a few other things too that I look for. Like a big one for me is character and values. What is that coach going to teach you? That coach is going to spend a lot of time with your children or your child. Are they going to be a good role model? Are they going to be a good influence? So that's another thing that I think is very high on the priority list for parents to look at. And what you usually see is parents will have a coach who they can check the box on one or two of the things that I mentioned, but it's not a home run. And so there's a deficit there. There's something missing there. And you do the best you can. In some areas, there's no one really great available. And you just have to do the best you can. Maybe the parent can make up for some deficiencies in the coach. For example, a coach who's maybe young and is a very good player, accomplished player, former top college player, or former professional player, they may not have the sports science background. They may not be even, maybe they might not be the greatest role model for the kid, but the parent could be on site and working with that coach on the court a lot with their child and sort of run interference on that and sort of make it all come together and sort of fill in for the deficits that the coach has. So many times when you see a parent working alongside a coach in tandem, oftentimes the parent is trying to supplement what the coach lacks or trying to complement the coach in some way. And as a duo, they're able to succeed and provide an incredible experience for the player. But the coach hire itself is still a flawed hire. The parent is doing everything they can to make it work. So you have to decide as a parent, are you able to invest that much time into your kid? And many families that I work with, the parents are really dedicated and they want to be involved like that. But certainly as a parent, you'd want to try to hire someone who has as few deficits as possible, and you want to be knowledgeable about what those deficits are so you can fill in the missing areas, right, as best you can. So I was getting to the next biggest mistake, or the second biggest mistake that I see parents make. And we may have to kind of end the show like that because I think I'm going way over time. We're trying to keep the show to about an hour or so. But this has been a really good talk, guys. I appreciate you all tuning in. I appreciate all the waves. I appreciate seeing some old friends here. Hey guys, thank you so much for waving and listening. But another big mistake that parents make is they get the wrong coach for their junior kid. So if I had $1 for every parent who told me, I got this great coach, he just got off the tour, and he's been working with so-and-so, and so-and-so, and now we've hired him to train my 8 or 9-year-old. I mean, come on. That dude has no experience working with young children. Working with an ATP player for years is completely different than working with a child. Another example, we've got this great coach for Johnny or Sarah. He's a Division I college coach. He's got a lot of experience. He's had 20 years of winning teams. Okay, I'm sure that guy is a great coach, but probably not for your 9 or 10 or 11-year-old, because that guy spends, or girl, spends they spend their time coaching older teenagers, and 20-somethings in college. They don't have the years of experience training young kids. So I tell parents all the time, when you're looking for a great junior developer for your child, please look for experience developing juniors. You should look for a track record. I could put that as priority number 3. Make sure your coach has a proven track record and can give you references. Talk about this all the time. There's a lot of con artists out there. There's a lot of shuck and jive. There's a lot of false claims, fake news. Tennis coaches in many ways, are like used car salesmen. They claim a lot of stuff. They do a lot of things to get the sale. Sometimes unethical things. And there are many examples of coaches who make false claims about working with the player, or they bolster their resume, they bulk up their resume with players who they really just had, they didn't have a serious relationship with. They were sort of affiliated with the player, or maybe they were a hitting partner with the player, but then they sort of burnished their resume to make it look like they played a more significant role in the player's career. And parents need to be very wary of that. And they need to do their due diligence when hiring a coach. I think most parents just believe, what the coach says, Ask for a reference. Say, hey, can I talk to that player's parents? Can I talk to that player if they're an adult? Can I get, do you have any letters of reference? Can I get the parents' emails or their phone number to call them? I do that all the time. I pride myself on being able to give anyone who asks as many references as they would like. Because I built up good relationships with these families over the years. I have these relationships, and they're valuable. They mean a lot to me, not just on a personal level, but they mean a lot to me as a coach, especially as a coach who, I played Division I, and I played on the pro circuit, but didn't really make it. I didn't make it as an ATP player. So for me, it's super valuable to have a track record, a proven track record, so that when people have questions about my ability, they want to know, who are you? You weren't a famous player. It's very important to have those references to show your track record and your ability to develop a kid. And parents should look for that. All right, so that's kind of how I see it. There's probably a lot more I could get into it with parents and finding a good junior coach, but those were the big 3. So remember, if a coach has a lot of experience at the college level or the pro level, that doesn't always necessarily translate to junior development. And look for a coach who has a track record of junior development. That means someone who's, if you have an 8-year-old, look for someone who's taken an 8-year-old and train them for many years and prepare them to be a top whatever you're looking for, top in the country, got them to the ITF circuit, got them to the pro level or top college level. I mean, make sure you're working with someone that can give you a reference, a person you can talk to who can prove that this actually happened, that this coach spent time with this player, because so many coaches embellish. I'll use that word euphemistically. You know what I'm talking about. Another word is, some coaches straight up lie about players that they've trained, players that they're working with. They straight up fake news, people. So please watch out for that. And yes, look for a coach who played at a high level, as high a level as you can find. But also look for a coach who's hungry, who has an insatiable appetite not only to develop players, but to learn and continue their education. Look for a coach who's still passionate. And look for a coach who can communicate everything that they've learned over their career, because there are many examples of great players who don't really communicate their knowledge very well. They're not able to transmit their knowledge and experience in a way that inspires and spurs transformation in a student. So, guys, that's how I see it. Let me know your thoughts. If you have more questions about how to find a great coach for your kid, I help parents all the time with that. And a lot of the parents are looking to interview me and understand my background and what I do and players I've worked with and how I can make a difference for their kid. And to be honest, if I don't feel that it's a good fit, I will usually try to educate parents and find them someone who's a better fit. Another just kind of popped in my head along the same subject is maybe one more quick priority is a tactical coach versus a technical coach. Some coaches are very tactically and strategically oriented, and they're great for older players who are transitioning to the pro tour, or older players who are traveling a lot and they need that type of coach. And then there are other coaches who are very technical, biomechanics based, and those are usually the coaches you want to develop the nuts and bolts, the hardware of your junior, of your player when they're young. So as a parent, you got to know that's a really important question to ask. I educate parents a lot, and that's one of the big ones. Popped in my head there. Really important one is you got to ask a coach, what are your strengths? Are you more of a tactical guy, or are you more of like the nuts and bolts guy who likes to get into the details and fix technique? Because that's really important depending on where your player's at. If the player's young and is not fully technically formed, it's very important to get a technician. If the player is a little older, maybe, let's say 12 or 13 or 14 or 15, 16, 17, transitional pro, then it's really not that important to have a great technical knowledge. Your coach doesn't need to have that. The coach is mainly a motivator, an inspirational force, and a tactician, and maybe some other aspects of a traveling coach, like an organizer, a planner. Sometimes a coach is a business manager, things like that. So there are other skill sets that are important depending on the level of your player and what the player needs. So parents, please do your due diligence and ask these questions. It's crazy to hire an amazing tactical coach who has a great resume of working with players at the ATP level to teach your kid a forehand. right? That's crazy, but you see that all the time. I'll leave you with one more parting thought. Something that drives me nuts is just because your coach was like top 100, but my coach was 150, doesn't make your coach better than my coach. So I'm really tired of parents like talking like that, and you hear that talk all the time at tournaments and stuff. Oh yeah, we're working with so and so. Yeah, he was top 50 in the world. Oh really? Well, we're working with so and so, and he or she was top 30 in the world. That's crazy talk, okay? Yeah, at that level, those players have a lot of experience no matter what. I mean, is it amazing to work with maybe a former top 10 player? Like if you could get a lesson with Emilio Sanchez, who was number 6 in the world or 7 in the world. Is that amazing? Yeah, it's amazing. But just because Emilio was 7 in the world doesn't mean he's an automatically better coach than whomever, Sergio Casal, who was like top 30 in the world, or anyone else, you name it, any other former player. It's crazy to compare rankings of coaches like that, because there should be coaching rankings, and there's not. There's player rankings, former player rankings, but that has very little bearing, as I've discussed. Doesn't have a huge bearing on their coach ranking, because there's so many other factors involved with choosing and being a great coach. So I leave you with that. Please don't be that parent who's always talking about how good a player their kid's coach is or was. It's so annoying. I mean, talk to me about how they coach. Talk to me about how educated they are. Talk to me about how passionate they are, what a great communicator they are, what a great inspirational force they are. Talk to me about the X factor that they have. Talk to me about their integrity and their character. Those are the things you got to stack up, and you have to research, and you have to know about, and you should value very highly when choosing a coach, not just the ranking. Okay, guys, so I'll leave you with that. It was a great show. I enjoyed the discussion as always. And I appreciate all the friends signing on and waving. I appreciate the entire community of this program. Thank you all for watching. I know everyone has limited time, and time is valuable. So I really appreciate anyone who takes the time to listen to me talk and who learns and grows from this program. As I mentioned at the onset of the show, if you like the show, please share with friends. Let other people know about the program so we can build a larger community. And I will see you guys on the next broadcast. God bless and good night.